Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing about Swagger Open API. Now, what exactly do we mean by Swagger Open API? I'm very sure for most of us who build like backend applications and who build APIs, we might have come across Swagger, Postman, Collection, most of those kind of stuffs. Now the question is, what exactly is Swagger Open API and why do we even need it at first? Now, when you're dealing with applications, when you're building applications, there are scenarios and cases whereby consumers, product managers, front-end engineers need to test your API endpoints, your REST API or GraphQL API endpoints, which you've developed on the server or on the back end. And it makes more sense for them to dive into your codes, to start reading your routes or start reading your parameters and bodies and all those kind of stuff. Now, how do they get acquainted with with your server? How do they test what each endpoint does, the response it's supposed to give, and all of that? That's what Swagger does for you. So it gives you like an interface for you to be able to, play around and test whatever code has been written on the back end. So today's tutorial and today's video is basically aimed at showing you how to set up a Swagger API documentation in a Node.js application. So let's go straight into the practical aspect of the video.
All right, so right now what we have here is basically a very simple Node.js application that doesn't have anything at the moment, just a server that is running at port 4100, And this is the application or this is the project folder that we are going to be using to, set up Swagger. So the first thing we want to do here is to install all dependencies which Swagger makes use of, and one of them is the Swagger JS doc, and we're going to install the Swagger JS doc. We are also going to install the Swagger UI Express, which is what is going to create the UI for us. Now we'll have this tool installed in our application, and while that is installing, let's go into the index file. Okay, we have it installed. Then we want to require the two of them here. So the first one which we're going to be requiring here is the Swagger JS doc. Then this will require Swagger JS doc. Then the second one here is going to be the Swagger UI, which would also require Swagger UI Express. Now, the next thing we want to do here is we want to set up the Swagger instance so that it can be passed into the Express server and it can be recognized. Now, the next thing we'll be doing here is to set up a Swagger option. And inside of the Swagger option, we have a couple of things. The first thing would be the Swagger definition. And inside of the Swagger definition, we'll have the Open API version, which in our own case, we're going to be using 3.0.0. I think that should be the latest as of now, but definitely might not be. And the next thing we'll have here is the info. And in the info, we have a couple of things like the version number of our own documentation. You can decide to start from version 0.0.1 or 1.0.0. It depends on whatever it is you want to have. So for the info here, the first thing will be the version, and in our own case we start with 1.0.0, and we go to the title. The title will just basically be simple, let's just call it simple Swagger setup. Then we'll have the description. The description here will just be a simple Swagger documentation setup. Then we'll also have maybe the contact, but we can do it with all of those ones. We don't need them, but just for the sake, we can just have it as Kingsley. Then we'll also have servers. Servers currently is going to be what your application is running on, and server is going to be an array of strings because you could have multiple servers. Like for example, Our app is currently running on port 4100, so which means our first server is going to be localhost 4100. And if you've got a couple of other servers also running this same thing, you definitely would have them there. Now, outside of the info, we would also have the schemes, and the schemes here would be HTTP and HTTPS. That's what we basically have. Now, there's some other things that would need to be added, like for example, in components, there are some routes that needs to be authenticated, all those kind of stuffs. But we're just gonna leave that for now, and let's just leave this the way it is right now, and save it. Now, the next thing we want to do here is open an instance for Swagger. So Swagger docs will now be equals to the Swagger JS docs, then we pass Swagger options inside of there. Then we'll do app.use API docs. Then we're using the Swagger UI.serve and Swagger UI.setup. Swagger docs. Now I'm going to explain this thing one step at a time so that you get everything that is going on here. This is server, not server. Now, the first thing we've done here is we've required the package, the Swagger JS doc package and the Swagger UI Express package. Now, the second thing we've done here is we've created the options which our Swagger, documentation is carrying, which is basically the Swagger options, the Swagger definition, the Open API version, the info, all of those stuff. Now, the next thing we're doing here is we are creating an instance of the Swagger JS docs and passing the Swagger options which we created above inside of it. And finally, we are telling our Express server to make use of the Swagger docs. Whenever we go to /API-docs, we can now see, the Swagger docs. Now, if we save this and let's say we go to the application, let's run this again, npm run dev. Okay, there is an issue here. It says options.apis is required and it should be an array. Let me see, what is that? Okay, yes, so we need to pass APIs here. And for now, we've not created the route, but we're just going to call this routes.js. Let's just have it like this. Now, what this means is it will go into every route folder and look for every JavaScript file inside of the route folder. So which means we have to create a routes folder here, and it goes inside of the routes folder and checks for every JavaScript file so as to be able to generate the Swagger endpoint setup for that particular route. So I think that should solve the issue we're having. Okay, it's still telling us missing or invalid input options .api. Oh, this was supposed to be outside. That was a mistake from me. I think this is outside and now we should be good. Yeah, so we're running on 4100. So I think right now if we go to let's open up a new window and just go to localhost 4100. Our server is currently running, and if we go to /API docs, we should be getting the Swagger setup. So you can see that right now we don't have any endpoints, which is fine, but you can see that everything we've set up at this point basically shows up. You can see the simple Swagger setup, the description, the contact name, the servers, all of those things are now inside of here. You can see that this is the version number, the title, the description, and all of that. Now, how do we add routes into our application? The first thing we want to do here is inside of the route, I'm just going to create a file that says index.js. Now here, I'm going to set up a new route and just say express equals to require express, then router equals to express the router, then just gonna module.export this router for now. Now the first route, let's just say route to get user name. That's the first route we want to create, the route to get the username. Now in creating this route, the first thing we want to do here is set up a router.get and just call this profile. And inside of here, I'm just going to create a demo user and just say name John Doe, email johndoe@gmail.com. Let's just use those two details for now. And at the end of the day, we want to send back these details to the front end or to the as a JSON. And we're just going to send back demo user. So now we want to get a profile of a user. Now, in real sense, these details would basically, be coming from the database or some form of third-party data or API, stuff like that. But for the sake of our own tutorial and our own learning, I'm just like creating a demo user here. And now, you might be surprised, okay, what's the next thing to do? Basically, it's just to come in here and import the route. So we're going to call this index route require route index. So I'm just going to do app.use API. Then here we'll have index routes. I think that solves that. Now let's see if we go to localhost. Let's try to go to localhost 4001 slash API slash profile. You can see we're getting this, but you'd be surprised that not every user would definitely know that you have to go into this route and you have to do all of these stuffs, all of these kind of things. Now, how do we bring it into Swagger? Just to let the user understand that, okay, from my Swagger documentation interface, I can actually be able to test any endpoints I want to test. Now, the first thing you definitely would want to do here is just to have the Swagger setup. Now, the first thing we have here is we'll just call @swagger. Now, inside of here, the next step we have /API /profile. That's basically the route which we're working with. And then the next thing, this is a get request. And in the get request, we basically have the summary, which is basically fetch user profile details. Then we also have the description, which is fetch, let's just call this fetch details of the user, or fetch profile details rather. Fetch profile details of the user. Now we also want to pass the tags, and the tags would basically be what this route falls under. And in our own case, we can say, okay, for this route, it's falling under profile. Now, the next thing we want to pass here is the response. Like, what does the user see as the response? And if it's a 200 response, then it means the description can just be something like, let's say, user profile fetched successfully. Then if it's a 400, we can just call that unable to fetch user profile data. Now let's save this and see if we get something of that sort in our Swagger UI. Let's refresh this. We're not getting it yet, so let's go back and see what the issue is. Here we have I think this is more of like an indentation issue. Let me see. Okay, let's try it now and see if it works. I think we should be good now. Yeah. So this is basically how the Swagger API looks like. And if we try this out, execute, you find out that we get a response. And with this, you can be able to create like several API endpoints for each route that you have. Like for example, you could have a different route again that is, let's say, a delete, and this could be to delete a profile of a particular user, something like this. And we can just say something like profile deleted successfully. Now, how do we create a route for this in Swagger? Similar layouts, just to take this, have it here, and this would be delete. Here we have /profile/id, so which means we have id here, and instead of fetch user profile, this would be delete user profile, and then basically this would be profile deleted successfully, and here unable to delete. Now if you save this and check it out, you would see that we have the delete routes here. You can see we have the fetch and we have the get, we also have the delete. Now for the delete, we definitely would need to have a space or an input for an ID, because we actually need to pass like the ID of the user which we want to remove or delete. And that's basically something similar to what we have here. The only difference is this would be parameters, and here we'll have this as part, we'll have this as name, which would be ID. We would also have type, which has to be an integer. It also has to be a required value, so it's going to be required value. And finally, let's say the description. The description here is just going to say user ID. Now let's see what this gives us. Now you can see we have a user ID, so which means if you put in a user ID here of 2 and execute, you get this. So whatever we've set up right now is more like a very simple approach. When you're dealing with different endpoints, you're going to have post requests, you're going to have patch requests, you're going to have get requests, a lot of them like that. Now the question is, what do you do from here? Like, how do you take it up to a more advanced level? If you go to Swagger Open API docs, you should see everything that is required of you. Like, your documentation has everything in terms of the specification, in terms of the definitions, in terms of the what each request needs to carry, like the post, the get, all those kind of stuff. Like, everything is there. So all you need to do is just go through the documentation, and you're going to see for yourself like what we've been able to set up so far. I don't want to go into much detail so as not to bore you or make the video very long, but I think if you need something more advanced, like let's say we go deeper into making other requests, nested API routes, all those kind of stuff, let me see the comments in the comment section, and I will definitely make a video specifically for that. But like I said, the main approach or the main reason and goal for this particular video is to introduce you to Swagger and show you how you can be able to set up Swagger in a Node.js application. Now, Swagger it's not only used in Node.js, you could also use it in other languages like Golang, like Java, and they all have like different approaches as to how to handle that. But all in all, it gives you like a better high level interface for someone who is not technically inclined to be able to test whatever your endpoint does. And yeah, that's the reason for this video. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this video across to every other persons you have out there, and I'll see you in the next video.